The barbarians are coming. Tylis in particular is a problem and must be kept in check. The Athenians continue to resent your rule. They may turn against you, or convince your Spartan allies to betray their treaty. No matter, faced with hostility from Epirus, Sparta should remain true, and may distract Epirus long enough for you to consolidate your rule at home. Conflict with the remaining successor kingdoms is inevitable, and you must be ready. Do not be afraid to seek military support from others if necessary. Rest assured, Makedon is the true heir to Alexander's legacy. It will rise once more.
Here it is, the first successor kingdom that I will be covering in depth, the Antigonid Dynasty. And I will be specifically covering the period after the fall of Antigonus I, and when Demetrius manages to retake the kingdom of Macedon and Antigonus II solidifies that takeover. So I believe the ruler that we have here is, in fact, Antigonus II. And if we take a look at the family tree, yes, Antigonus II Gonatas. So I'm gonna marry him off, so we get some more people in the dynasty. I'll also be going through this campaign as I talk about this. So, Antigonus II is famous for solidifying the situation of the kingdom of Macedon. And when he came to power, the Greeks of the south were squabbling and trying to free themselves from the group of Macedon. The tribes in the north were raiding, particularly the Illyrians coming in from the region where the Ardea tribe was, which is up over here. So if we take a look at the tactical map, here is the region the Illyrians were coming out of. They were also partially coming out of here. There were some Gauls coming out of here as well, and Antigonus II is himself credited with, he wanted to be credited with defeating the Gauls, but actually the Aetolian League, which is right here, is actually in this game in the Divide at Impera mod. The Aetolian League was the one who actually defeated the Gallic invasion under Brennus, the Celtic invasion of Greece. Antigonus II Gonatas had underestimated Brennus, and Brennus had eluded him, and the Aetolian League took care of it instead. So Antigonus II Gonatas is a very strong, pretty fair ruler. He didn't score victory every time, but he did do much to solidify the Antigonid kingdom. And now I'm going to take a deep dive into the culture of Makedon, because you can watch kings and generals if you're looking for events and times and periods, but they don't really go into what it was like for the everyday person to be living in these kingdoms. And that is what I would like to do. So, starting off, Pella is pretty much the center of the Antigonid kingdom at this point. And Pella was again always the capital of the kingdom of Macedon, even before Alexander the Great came to power, and when Alexander the Great was in power, and after he died, it was still the capital of Macedon, and up until now, it's still the capital of Macedon, no matter who controls Macedon. And Pella is a flourishing center of Greek culture, but it is also a center of the idea of being a Hellene. So, being a Hellene, being part of the Hellenistic period, comes from Pella. Pella is very unique in that way. And Pella even sounds a little bit like Hella. So, it's really a center of the Macedonian culture and the source of the Macedonian footprint across the world, across the Eastern world, which is everything out to here. I mean, all of these guys are successor kingdoms. Seleucid kingdom out here, Ptolemaic kingdom down there, Pergamon, even Pergamon's not a diadochi, but is a successor. And then there's Pontus, and all of these kingdoms going all the way out to here is all the footprint of Macedonian culture. So, an everyday person in the Antigonid kingdom would have really just lived the same way as Macedonians had always lived in ancient Greece, only under Philip II's reformed ideal of the Macedonian state, which was to provide a more militarized, more centered on Greek culture type of state, and a more tactful state that knew what to do in any situation, no matter what. But Macedonian loyalty, here's the important thing about the people, the indigenous people of Macedon, the true Macedonians, which are the people that we are discussing as of now. We'll discuss some of the other cultures on the fringes in a moment. But the true Macedonian people, their loyalty had to be earned, and they had very high respect for generals who showed and proved their skill and authority over the Macedonian state, and they had to prove that they were worthy to be leaders of Macedon, and that was the very unique thing about Macedonians. Macedonians, their loyalty couldn't be bought, their loyalty couldn't be bartered, their loyalty was earned, and that is central to the Macedonian culture. So, as I head down here, I think I'm going to think about attacking the Aetolian League, but first I gotta get some technology going here. So preferably logistics is already researched. Let's cut back on upkeep for the armies for now. So the Chalcaspides, another reform of Philip II. Much favored by the Antigonids. The Antigonids were a very phalanx corps, cavalry, punching arm style army type of successor kingdom. That was the style that they favored. The phalanx was the core of the army. The cavalry was the punching arm. The two arms, like the body is the phalanx and the two arms are the cavalry on the flanks. The body is the phalanx and the cavalry are the punching arms on the flanks. So those two words kind of sound the same. They also, of course, had specialized infantry and infantry that came from different ethnic areas throughout Makedon. And these ethnic peoples would live out their everyday lives serving the Macedonian state, producing whatever they produced, whatever they specialized in, whether that be farming or any sort of craftsmanship in the villages that were in the province of Makedon, such as this one and the ones in the Chalkidiki Peninsula, such as these on the tips, and throughout. And Macedonians were always very renowned herders. Now, Macedonians did not dilute their wine, and they were heavy drinkers, and that was a central part of their culture as well. I personally believe that they did it to show their strength over the other softer, considered by them to be softer southern Greeks. But Sparta, of course, had to be left out of that whole categorization, as Sparta was far from being soft. Even though they did live the leisure life of the rich, they made up for it with things like the Ugogi, and they were certainly not soft. So here, let's get a hold of some of these. Let's get a hold of some of these Macedonian pikemen. So, loyalty was earned by the Antigonid state, and I'll be doing another video of the final years of Antigonid rule under Philip V and his son Perseus, because there's another campaign in this game where you can actually play the Macedonian kingdom under Philip V, and that's where I'll be discussing all of that and the war against Rome and everything and how that affected the land. But for the time being, Greek power in Makedon was strong. Macedonian power was strong. And the difference between being Macedonian and being Greek was growing rather than shrinking like Alexander would have wanted it. It was growing. Being Macedonian was different than being Greek. Greeks considered themselves to be the old-fashioned city-state style, league-style nations, but Macedonians considered themselves to be the empire-building version of the Greeks. Basically, the strong, tough guys who exerted their authority over the Greek world and the world beyond, wherever they went. And that was the big difference about the way the Macedonians felt about themselves versus the way the Greeks felt. The Greeks wanted to stick to the old ways, the Macedonians wanted to be more like the Roman Empire. And the Macedonians would succeed in many ways, but they would also fail, as they would fail to adapt to their enemies, which is the huge reason why Rome was the most successful state in antiquity in Europe. The Macedonians would not adapt, and this is true for all successor states, but it's especially true and a little bit sad for the Antigonids, because the Antigonid had that Macedonian core population. They didn't have to worry about getting professional Macedonian phalangites from all the way from some territory where there were more Macedonian settlers in Alexander's empire. No, they had it. It was right here. This is Makedon. This is where Macedonian men are born. So you don't have to worry about that Macedonian population deficiency. And it's a little bit sad that they themselves didn't think a little bit more like Philip V and take a page out of other people's book and start expanding and reforming their chain of command and making it so individual units can do individual things, and kind of dividing up the phalanx, maybe try to make a more flexible version of it or something. I mean, they stuck to tradition, but it's true that Macedonians are very traditional people, and they enjoy sticking to tradition a lot. So that is the Antigonid Dynasty, and that is the one thing that sets the Antigonid Dynasty apart from all the other successor states, besides the fact that it controls Macedon itself, is that it was a very traditional state. It didn't want to adopt any other things from other cultures that much. And even Antigonus I adopted some things from some of the other cultures and some of the other regions that he was conquering when he was trying to take back all of Alexander's empire. But the Antigonid kingdom after him didn't really like to adopt other things. They like to stay very Macedonian and very at the core. And that made him stronger, but it also made him weaker in a lot of ways. And they eventually fell short when fighting against Rome, which is what I'll be discussing in my next video. So let's try to see what we can do over here. So Pella definitely needs to be upgraded, but got to be careful about the food situation. I'd upgrade this for sure. Check out diplomacy.
We have need of talk, I'm sure. But we also need good food, a warm fire. This agreement is like a feast after an Greetings, friend. We will speak together.
Yeah, no. That's not gonna work. So Pergamon will have to wait. Epirus will have to wait. For now, or maybe
Be
we could
welcome,
actually get...
but may Athena
No?
strike us all dumb if we speak at...
Okay. See how it is. What about the Salukis?
For the sake of friendship
Now,
that is
traditionally,
made
the
and friendship
Antigonids
to
did
come.
ally with the
Greetings.
Salukis against Ptolemy,
Now,
because
let us seek wisdom together.
the thing I'll dive deeper into about with Ptolemy is that if I go back to the strategic overview, Ptolemy would try to be a supporter of the freedom of the Greek city-states against Macedonian oppression, and since the Salukis were enemies of the Ptolemies, the Macedonians naturally made an alliance with the Salukis against Ptolemy. So it was kind of a fight of Ptolemy and the Greek city-states, with the exception of Sparta. Sparta tended to stay out of everything a little bit more, but it was the alliance between Ptolemy and Athens and some of the other smaller states against the Antigonid Dynasty and the Seleucid Empire. So that was kind of the whole thing that was going on, and Pergamon tended to lean on the side of the Greek city-states and Ptolemy since they were such Philhellenes like you all are, and they loved the ancient Greek culture so dearly, like we all do. So, but the truth about it is, it's like they all loved ancient Greek culture dearly. I mean, let's not lie. They all loved it a lot. We know it. So, people on the fringes. People on the fringes of the Antigonid Dynasty would have consisted of various tribes that were just passing over, maybe crossing over the border, doing some business, migrating, settling for a little while, and they would have definitely found, their men would have definitely found service in the Macedonian army. And as we can see here in the recruitment, it shows how there are some Iphicratians, so that was obviously one of the tribes that existed in the region, and there was also, let's see, rest look like they're Macedonians. Come on, help me out here. You're not helping me out. So maybe if we look for the, yes, here we go, mercenaries. So the Agrianians would have also been, I believe they would have been more related to the Illyrians or possibly even the Epirotes. And then there's Agrianian sellswords, or sell axemen, I guess you should say. Mologian hoplites coming from Epirus. Mologia is the dominant tribe of Epirus. And then there's, of course, various Macedonians just fighting for money, probably former veterans of Alexander's empire who just want to make a lot of money rather than become true patriotic soldiers of Makedon, which is what I would have been, to be honest, because I love Makedon. And Thracians, too, coming from the northeast along the border. So there was definitely these people living on the fringes, and they would have had deals with the Macedonian people, and they would have peacefully coexisted, not always fighting. The Thracians obviously would have fought a little bit more since they were a little more warlike, and they like to worship the god Ares, who is particularly unpopular among Greeks as they favor Athena, who's more strategic, but still, the Thracians were still cool. I'm sure not all of them fought, especially if they served in Antigonus's army for money. So, the peoples along the fringes brought their own individual traditions and cultures to Macedon, but they were never able to, of course, they were never able to fully penetrate into the Macedonian heart of Makedon, which is so big you can hear it beating from China, from the Han Dynasty. And that cultural strength that the Macedonians had is what is really, really at stake here when the Macedonians fight for their dominance, supremacy, and continued existence in the ancient world. And that is the thing that I really wanted to emphasize about the populations of the Antigonid Kingdom and the various changes that occurred as far as their relations with the people surrounding them. I mean, at one point they were sort of friendly with the Illyrians, and at the next junction, the Illyrians were coming down and totally destroying Epirus, almost to the point of making Epirus extinct, and the Macedonians made enemies of the Illyrians. So it just goes back and forth. And Makedon stayed strong through it all, and their beating heart still continued to beat strong. And their kings would live on in the memories of all of us for thousands of years, and I'm sure thousands of years in the future. If I was alive in the future, I'd remember them, I know that. So, now that I've recruited these phalangites, let me check out anything else I can do around here. I'm going to change this into a shipwright or a trading port, one of the two. Probably a trading port, but not yet, as I'm waiting to actually take Larissa so I can build a farm here and have another source of food besides the fishing port I've got here. So let's check it out. Let's check out our summary as far as political dynasties goes. So there's the Thessalian nobility, local Hellenic nobles, Macedonian nobility, and the Antigonid Dynasty, which we are respected. Good. So everybody's loyal to us, and we're in pretty good shape. And one other thing is they have increased morale against barbarians. Again, that core Macedonian cultural influence is reflected here. So they are very much against the barbarian world. Instead of wanting to adopt it, they want to establish their authority over it and fight against it. And increased industrial income because of commercial leases. Now, this is a very important thing. So Makedon liked to lease land to big industrial producers throughout the Macedonian province, the province of Makedon. And these producers would produce industrial goods for the Macedonian state, and they would kind of have their own commercial businesses and not enterprises, really. I mean, it was too far back for enterprises to really exist, but commercial businesses. And these lands leased by the Macedonian state would in that way provide much industrial income to the Macedonian state, as these businesses would thrive across the Macedonian community. So they were very industrial and very business forward, but at the same time very militaristic and very powerful, not a successor kingdom that you want to pick a fight with. I mean, even the Ptolemaic kingdom tended to be soft at times, but the Antigonid kingdom, only Rome was really able to deal such a deathly blow to them. Nobody else really could. Everybody else usually trembled and fell over pretty quick when faced by an Antigonid army and the force of Antigonid power, and their political influence over all of Greece was extremely powerful. They could appoint leaders of any Greek city-state and install their own governments in any of the Greek city-states quite easily, and there was little the Greeks could do about it, because it was either you accept or you face a wall of sarissas and you lose because your hoplite dory spears are not long enough to reach past the sarissas, which are a few meters long. So there you have it. That's pretty much Macedonian supremacy in a nutshell. And it worked for hundreds of years. So worked even better under the Antigonids than it did under Cassander, because Cassander was very much a traitor to Alexander's ideology, whereas the Antigonids were more into upholding that ideology, but keeping Macedonian supremacy over all those they conquered. Because the one thing Antigonus I disagreed about here, which is a key thing to remember, he disagreed about the fact that Alexander wanted to give all of these foreign peoples equal status to Macedonians. He believed that the Macedonian Empire should exist the way Alexander's building it, only Macedonians should stay superior to all these other peoples that are being conquered. And again, that's where that big Macedonian heart comes to play, specifically under the Antigonid Dynasty, not just under every dynasty that held Makedon as a part of its successor kingdom, but specifically under the Antigonids. And that would be huge for the Antigonids and critical to their survival. But as we will see in the next video, due to their proximity to Rome as opposed to the other successor states, which were more distant from Rome, due to their close proximity to the Roman Empire, they would come to blows with Rome first, and they would bear the brunt of full Roman power first. And that next video about Philip V and Perseus of Macedon will be coming very shortly, so stay tuned for that. This has been an amazing experience talking about the Antigonid Kingdom, and have an amazing day. I will see you all in the next video. My Phil Hellenes, the Ancient Greek, is out.